Hey, I'm Morgan Crook from Ventex Technology. I'm here today with John Anderson in Megavolt Neon, and we're going to do some really basic and well done parts about some fundamentals of working with neon. Here we're going to be tipping off something where you, in spite of all your great tube bending skills, you can make a great tube into trash if you don't have good technique here. This is something that will carry you through a long, long way. So John, what are you thinking about when you're tipping off here?
Well, I'm going to use two torches. I'm going to use a larger torch for the 6mm that's turned up pretty high. And I'm going to tip off the mercury trap first. What I'm thinking about is pulling the glass apart and not letting the hot glass suck in on itself, because that is a recipe for a crack later on.
When you're you're tipping off twice because you got a mercury trap on this thing. Do you usually tip off twice, even on a red tube?
Not on a red tube.
You don't?
The only time you would tip off twice would be if if the tubulation is coming out of the top and you're just in an awkward position or something, and you needed to tip it off so you could move the tube and then get to it a little easier.
That's interesting, because I always tip off twice, even though it's sort of wasting time. It lets me get this second tip off done really, really nicely, which I think is super important.
So it starts to suck in and pull a little bit, pause, and then you go back in and let it just melt. But I like to let the two sharp tips melt together a little bit so we don't have all these sharp pieces of glass sticking out that poke people.
So pretty much as soon as the glass moves, you take the heat off of it and pull, and then put heat back on it to ooch it again? Is that a good way to say that?
Exactly. Exactly. And I'll shake the mercury in. And everybody's got a different technique here for, I'm going to use one of the old Nova Glow sandbags. That's a great way to do it.
I can't believe it doesn't have a hole in it with all the beads.
Dude, that thing is made out of Kevlar.
It's awesome.
It's got an incredibly high heat temperature thing. That's why back in the day we made them out of that stuff. Yeah.
And sometimes when I'm in a hurry, I'll stick my when I'm tipping off, I'll actually kind of curl my finger in here and hold it. But this is the best way to do it, is to anchor it with a sandbag. And it's going to be the same thing here, but I'm watching out for heat, getting too close to the electrode and cracking it. In fact, I'm going to turn this down just a little bit so I don't take a fool out of myself.
So you're using a splicing torch on this? You're using a tipping torch on the second version, right?
Yes, these are both. This is it's a fishtail burner, but it's just one I like to use. I know most people use a round head burner for tipping off. I don't know, just a personal preference.
I end up using that same style too. I've tried both, but part of it's just mainly what you started working with.
And I sort of move it back and forth because I want to get in and get out quickly before heat transfers. And I don't need the blower on this one. Same thing, it starts to collapse on itself, pull out, pause, and come back, and get the tip, and give it a little push, and come back, and there it is. What you want to look for is a nice arch inside, not with the glass, bubbling down where it's sucked in on itself. That's a good one.
So that was interesting watching how John tips off. Even though this is something that all tube benders do all the time, it's interesting to see how different people do it. And I do it a little bit different than John does. I usually don't use 6mm for hooking up to the manifold, but my manifold body's a lot smaller than his is. This makes good sense for what he's doing. So I'm going to use his splicing torch to tip off the first time. So heat evenly all the way around. I'll do a similar thing to John was doing, that as it starts to collapse, I'll take the heat off, pull as far as I can, and then tip off the rest of the way like that, okay? And even on a red unit, even though John says he tips off only once on these, I always do it twice to make sure that I get a really good tip off here. So, come back with the tip off torch. this weight that he's using here, this is lead shot filled. It is very heavy. It's nice and soft. It conforms to the bag. So we're going to put it down here. I always make sure that I can brace myself when I'm tipping off so I don't move the fires around so much. I got real good control over these, except for the fact that they're not on, which we'll work on there. And when I'm tipping off on these, you can see which way the flat part of the pinch is here. I try to go in with the torch that way on it as opposed to that way on it to start off. John had his own version of going in and heating it really quick. If I go in this way and heat evenly all the way around. Mine are normally flat rather than angled like this because I like turning it all the way around. These are really cold fires. And I start to see when it starts to move, take the torch off and pull as much as you can. Come back in and I heat on the opposite sides as much as possible. And I end up with tip off like that. If I want to make that smaller, I can break this tip off and heat that. And that lets me wipe off a little bit more glass on top of it. That can end up so you end up having, what you're looking for here is trying to get as even wall thickness throughout the top. If it could look like the top of a dome, top of an igloo, so it was equal wall thickness throughout the thing. That's what I'm looking for when I'm doing a tip-off. So, thank you all for taking time to look at this Ventex tube bending video. You can see this and other videos at ventextech.com. Thanks a lot. Bye.